Welcome to the Hong Kong On Screen podcast, brought to you by Hong Kong On Screen, a Los Angeles-based non-profit organization promoting films and culture of Hong Kong.
Welcome to the Hong Kong On Screen podcast. This is Catherine. In this episode, I'm so happy to talk to San Diego artistic director Brian Hu. And Brian is also an associate professor in TV film and new media at San Diego State University. He is teaching classes on film theory and international cinema. Brian is also a podcast host with Ada San, and his podcast named Saturday School, which is actually a very great podcast. I listen to that many times because they are talking about Asian American in film, in Hollywood film especially, I think, right? Okay, so thank you, Brian, for joining us to talk about the upcoming San Diego Asian Film Festival, particularly on the selection of Hong Kong films. Brian.
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm such a fan of Hong Kong cinema that it's especially gratifying to be on a podcast dedicated to Hong Kong cinema.
Thank you. And then I know the San Diego Asian Film Festival, you have a great program, right? And I checked your webpage, you're going to show like 130 films from 30 countries, which will be actually started by this week, November 3rd and November 12th. So it's so amazing. Do you want to share with us a little bit about the San Diego Asian Film Festival a little bit, and how did the film festival run? Is it curated, call for participation or invitation or something like that? Yeah.
Sure. The San Diego Asian Film Festival is now in its 23rd annual edition, and we're very proud to say annual because it means we didn't take a break during COVID. And we are about a third of our films are dedicated to Asian American filmmakers and Asian American subject matter, and that's in some ways the heart of our festival because we know that how important it is to give Asian American filmmakers a voice. But the bulk of our festival, about 2/3 of it, are films from Asia, and that ranges from very mainstream films to short films, documentaries, experimental films, and just like weird little things that we found along the way. And our goal really is we take pride in trying to create a cross-section. So we don't necessarily say, this is how we wish Asian cinema could be. Like I think part of it is saying that, acknowledging that there are many audiences for Asian cinema and trying to pick films that represent that.
Okay, most of the film are like currently made, like usually it's like 2022, like current, right? But except the master section, I know those are like old film. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. So we try to we have an official cutoff of when films qualify. So if it's over, I don't know, like 15 months or something, by the time our festival rolls around, we're like, well, we could have just played that movie last year. Why didn't we play last year? We did make one exception, an important exception this year, which I'll get into later. It's Septet. Okay. So otherwise our films are usually world premiered somewhere in the world the same year we play it. So this year most of our films have world premiered in 2022. And then we do have a section that we called Classics Restored. And these are, as the title suggests, classic films. But they are restorations that have happened in the last couple of years. So it's a film that maybe was recently restored and had and is seeing the light of day in the last few years. So they still feel fresh.
I know in this year you have two actually in that classic restore actually from Hong Kong, right? So
That's
we
right.
are going to talk about that. Okay, so maybe the next question I'm going to ask probably maybe a little bit like funny because I actually want to know how many Hong Kong films has been shown in the San Diego Asian Film Festival, like in total, in the past.
All right, so I didn't count every single one, but I think I can estimate that in most years we play 2 feature films from Hong Kong.
Wow.
So on average, yeah. So if prior to this year we had 22 editions, then maybe 44 features. That's just my guess. I'm sure there's some years with more, some years with fewer. And of course, short films. Like we often get submissions from Hong Kong, and especially in recent years, when this idea of an independent filmmaking voice, I think has kind of had renewed importance in Hong Kong. I think the short films are worth looking into more carefully.
So if like on average is about 2. So this year actually you picked 7, right? Is it like kind of like a lot compared to like the previous edition?
Yes.
Wow.
And I will say this was not necessarily intentional, but I had certain things on my mind. For instance, so last year, as you and many listeners would know, the government, the Beijing government, is now requiring all filmmakers in Hong Kong to submit their films for censorship review. And when this happened last year, a lot of people online were basically saying Hong Kong cinema is dead. That, like, why? Basically, it's like your films don't belong to you anymore. You have no voice. You're just, do whatever the mainland says. And I totally understand why people would have that anxiety. But to me, calling Hong Kong cinema dead is not true, right? Because I think one of the great things about independent filmmaking is, and in places in Hong Kong and elsewhere, is that filmmakers are really smart. Like, if they are trying to convey something, they'll find a way to convey it. They'll find a way to, like, the films don't explicitly look objectionable to censors, and they'll find a way through. And Hong Kong cinema has done this for many years. And as well as if you turn to great examples of filmmakers in Iran, for instance, or hell, even in China, right? Like where there's so much censorship.
Whole 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
5th and 6th generation. Yeah.
And so there's a huge precedent for Hong Kong cinema, maybe just finding a new way. But if the passion to have a voice will persist, and I don't see why not, the films will continue to be made. And this year, I think with that in the back of my mind, I kept wanting to know more. So maybe I just did a little bit more research on Hong Kong this year than usual, because I thought it might be a little harder to find Hong Kong films, and it turned out no, it wasn't. And so I saw more films, perhaps more feature films from Hong Kong this year, and it just turned out a lot of them are really good.
Wow. Okay.
So that big number is also just a testament to Hong Kong filmmakers showing up and making great work.
Well, that's great to hear that, right? Because that's one of the points that I set up this Hong Kong on screen and then continue. Like, actually, it's inspired by your podcast. As I think podcast actually is really a good medium, and then it's really in a low cost, right, cheap to do it, and then so it's great to hear that. So I know that you are already in this the San Diego Asian Film Festival for a long time. So are there any very memorable thing or like very special thing like on Hong Kong film screening that it happened in the past? Like you remember, like I'm not sure. Okay, but do you have
yeah.
That you
I mean, there are so many great examples from the past. I mean, back in the day, the martial art films, kung fu films would be our number one sellout films. Like this is before streaming. And if it had Jackie Chan or Donnie Yen or something, like it would do really well. And so just the excitement in a theater was always what made Hong Kong films so those screenings had the best energy. But I would say the most memorable screening for any Hong Kong film we've had was actually last year, when we showed Inside the Red Brick Wall. Because not only did the local Hong Kong audience really show up for the screening, we packed 2 auditoriums for it. But we actually, so for those who don't know, this is a documentary about the protesters that stormed a university, and kind of the standoff that happened between protesters and the police.
And that's also like kind of like mark the end of the movement, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. And you get that feeling like it's in the air throughout the documentary, like where can we go from here? And so that documentary was shot by anonymous documentary filmmakers. And in kind of an interesting way, like they pooled resources, they pooled footage. So they were a collective, but they are unnamed for like privacy and security reasons.
I was there actually last time the screening, and then I stayed there until the post-screening discussion. That was great, right?
Right.
I remember you were the host, and then because the producer, the filmmaker, they were anonymous, so they didn't show up their face, but they have their voice out, but with the audience, the discussion actually were great.
Yeah, so I think that's what made it a legendary night. that we had one of the filmmakers anonymously zooming in to our screening.
Yes.
And we had no idea. I'm not in contact with the filmmakers. I was through the distributor who made the connection. So we had no idea who was going to be on the other line or how frank they were going to be. And it was amazing that they were very frank about their experience and talked about the craft, talked about what it means to be a documentary filmmaker. I just feel like because they're not going to get an interview like this with them published, that the conversation we had is really like one of a kind.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so let's go to today. This year's your selection on the Hong Kong film, right? I think that's your expertise because basically I think you should have a lot of criteria why you are selecting all this film. But from your catalog, I think for the San Diego Asian Film Festival, you divide it into like 6 films. One is Asian pop, the second one is Asian American panorama, and then classic restore, you just mentioned about that. And then another one I think is based on the masters, like directors or maybe actors. And then you also have the section called special presentation. And then finally is the unknown pleasure. And then this year you have how many Hong Kong films actually? 7 or 8. Yeah. Okay, but that's one Kung Fu film. I couldn't check any background on that film. Is it a Hong Kong film?
Oh, I might as well mention this. We have every single festival, we have something called Mystery Kung Fu Theater. I will say usually it's a Hong Kong movie. So maybe there's another Hong Kong film this year.
Oh, so that's why actually you didn't announce the name, right? That's why I couldn't find that name.
Right. So what happens is, I don't know if you know, like back in the 1980s, in the United States, on like Saturday or Sunday or something, some cities in the country would just play Kung Fu movies, and they would be dubbed in English, and they're probably edited, but there's like a cult audience for this.
I see.
And what I loved about it is people didn't know what movie was going to be shown. Or sometimes they knew it. They didn't really care what movie was going to be shown. They just showed up because they trust
the Kung Fu, right?
Kung Fu, yeah. And I feel like that audience still exists. The thing is, you can sort of you could find whatever movie you want now because of streaming. It's not that hard to find these films. But it's impossible to see them on the big screen. And the best part is to watch it with an audience. Because when we show Mystery Kung Fu Theater, the audience is laughing, they're screaming, and you feel a sense of community. And people keep coming back every single year, even though we never reveal what the movie is. And then we tell them, you're sworn to secrecy. You're not allowed to tell anybody what movie you watched. So I will say it's usually a Hong Kong movie.
Okay, but right now you are not going to give us any hint, right? Okay,
no clues.
That's great. Okay, but we're waiting to see about that one. But beside that one, right now we don't know yet. But right now on schedule, right? At least I think that's 7. I believe is a Hong Kong film. Okay, so how about we just based on the order or any order that you want to discuss? Okay, like the which one that you want to talk about first?
Maybe I'll talk about Septet, the story of Hong Kong.
Okay.
This one, because this is a film from 2020, the year 2020, and so technically this wouldn't qualify for our film festival, but this is a special case. First of all, I've been hearing about this movie since it was called Octet. But then, so the idea was Johnny To was the producer of this project, and he basically got 7 of his other kind of director friends who were all the biggest Hong Kong directors in the 80s and 90s to get together, and each person can make a short film that takes place in a different decade in Hong Kong's history, or roughly a different decade. Other rules were everyone was shooting on 35 millimeter, which I was hearing about this maybe 8 years ago, 8 years ago. So back then people were still shooting on film. And then every year I would check in with the sales agent and the producers, and they would say, it's not ready yet, it's not ready yet. And then soon Octet became Septet because John Woo dropped out. And then so getting it now, part of me is like, it feels like it's kind of old, but it almost feels like this was the last gasp of air in some ways of these filmmakers who don't make movies in Hong Kong anymore, right? Like Anne Hoyt mostly makes films in China. Choi Hark only makes films in China. Even Johnny To, he doesn't really make movies at all anymore, sadly. And the last few, even he has been making films in China. So to sort of see all these filmmakers still like be committed to, I want to tell a Hong Kong story. And here it is. And I mean, I would say like not all of them are great films, but I think it's the collective of it. It means so much to see this as a group. And yeah, and then it came out
with that because I'm sorry, okay, because I read a lot of review, actually a lot of like negative review from the Hong Kong film critics circle, and a lot of them actually criticized. Some of the short actually were really bad, but I think just like you said, right? Once when you collected the 7 directed all together, and then when we watch the whole story all together, it really means something to the Hong Kong cinema.
Yeah. And also some of us are just completists. Like I need to watch anything that An Hui makes. I just need to watch anything Johnny To. So this is like auteurism, right? And this is why we love the master section. Like I'll play films in the master section that are like, that's not the best film by this director, but I know some of you need to watch everything by this director. So it has sort of a built-in audience that watches movies this way.
You know, to be honest, I really feel like disappointed, or like I totally like gave up Choi Hak's film because he made, you know, the Changjing, the Lake of Changjing, right? I just totally like give up. Okay, he's actually no longer like a Hong Kong film director, but you know, the short that he made for this one is so good, right? You still can tell it's really a master.
Right.
So you cannot reject that title from him. So
yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's worth to watch it. Okay, and then how about the second one you want to discuss? Which one?
Maybe we could do some of these Asia pop films in the Asia pop section. I guess speaking of Johnny To,
we have 3, right? We have 3 there. The Detective and Mama's Affair, and then the Narrow Road. Yeah.
We could talk about Detective versus Sleuths, since we're kind of mentioned Johnny To, and then of course Johnny To's longtime collaborator Wai Ka-fai. I usually, I mean, Johnny To gets all the credit, right, for being the great filmmaker, and for good reason. And so, but people often wonder, like, how much of your movies is Johnny To, how much of it is Wai Ka-fai? Because we usually just say it's a Johnny To movie. So the more you watch Wai Ka-fai by himself, you realize, I think he's the crazy one. I think like Johnny To is his movies are so rigorously perfect, right? Like everything is exactly where it needs to be. Like there's no redundant information. You have to watch it very carefully, and if you do, wow, it's like a perfect puzzle piece coming together. Whereas Wai Ka-fai is the madman. I mean, in fact, he's made movies about like with the word mad in it in the title. And Detective versus Sleuths is very much in that tradition. You have Lau Ching-wan once again playing kind of a quote unquote mad character. I mean, this movie is it doesn't really make sense. Like I've watched it, and it just gets weirder and weirder as it goes along. But something about that reminds me of like the Hong Kong cinema I fell in love with in the 1990s. Just these films that are made very quickly, that have a kind of manic energy to them, and that puts Hollywood to shame. Makes Hollywood just look super lazy and bored. Nothing about Detective versus Sleuths feels bored. Like this is just nonstop action pummeling your brain.
And then the editing were so fast in the first 20 minutes. If you miss, okay, so don't go to the theater late. If you go late, right, if you miss the first 20 minutes, you actually miss the whole story. I think the beginning is so important to get into the story.
And like I said, it goes very fast.
Very, very, very fast, yes. Yeah. You know, this movie actually is released in some main theater, for example, like AMC. So I actually already went to see it in AMC Atlantic in LA. You know, full of audience. Like I think that was like my first time that I went to a Hong Kong movie, kind of like full house. Not kind of, actually it's really full house at night. I think we went there at 9:30. Yeah, it's the night show, night screening, but it's full house, and then it's so good, right? You know, the experience, because the people are just chasing the scenes, and then they laugh and sometime, and so I think going to see a movie in the theater is really very different from we are just like streaming the film at home. Yeah,
especially a movie like this where sometimes you're not sure if you should laugh because it's so kind of corny at times. But when you
for
hear
the pregnant woman, that section is everybody's laugh, you know.
Right. Oh my goodness, I still can't believe that happened in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So we're waiting, okay? So please, the audience, go to see the movie. There should be a lot of surprise for you to catch on, yeah. And the next one, Mama's Affair.
Yeah. This is
really
also
a
one
big
that got a
thing in
release
Hong
in
Kong.
some cities in the United States. It wasn't released commercially in San Diego. And so it's actually our fastest selling movie so far of the festival.
Wow.
This is just,
Do you know why?
Yeah. I think it's
you know
because of
why?
it's the pop star.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
just like the BTS version, the Hong
Right.
Kong version of BTS, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I like it. I mean, he's fine in it. I just like seeing the actress, Teresa Mo, who I know from like again 1990s Hong Kong films, and she's one of these like great 90s Hong Kong actresses who disappeared, sort of like half disappeared when they got married, and they sort of, I mean, like Hong Kong is pretty bad when it comes to representation of like middle-aged women. Like young actresses are hot and then suddenly they disappear. It's like these scriptwriters don't know what to do with a woman who's over 40 years old. So part of it is on the side of the scriptwriters, but also part of it is I feel like, I don't know if it's so like societal pressures or whatever it is, or like these actresses will get married to somebody and then sort of disappear. And there's countless examples of this. And then so to see Teresa Mo back in a movie where she plays somebody who is who has kind of been out of the industry. She plays somebody who used to be a talent agent, talent manager, but has been out of the industry because she got married and had a child. But this is her comeback story. So it's hard. Like I see it definitely as the characters come back, but also the actresses come back, and then maybe also like a certain like a spirit of Hong Kong cinema will never die. Also, right? Hong Kong entertainment, like we will, that we're still here and we're still going to foster a new generation. We're still here to support the new generation. Just the sense of continuity. And this, amongst other reasons, that this is just such a kind of a lovable movie. The music is pretty good too. And just a great like behind the scenes look at the Hong Kong entertainment industry with some cameos as well.
Yeah. And then also by the end, there's a lot of extra credit for the audience to watch. Do you remember? By the end of the movie, there's the Louis Gu Tin.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And then some other actor and actress also showing up by the end credit. And then just one additional remark on Teresa Mo. Actually, she never disappeared from the Hong Kong audience sense, because she, even though maybe, yes, not a lot of movies that she's acting, but actually she's very active in other fields. For example, like theaters, and then also
great.
like TV industry. And that's actually, I think she's still holding some radio show. And so she is actually really multi-talent, and then she is so good in everything, I think. Not only acting. I think maybe besides just singing, maybe she never sang, but I think she is very active in many other fields.
Oh, that's
so
great to hear.
I don't think she's actually really disappeared from the Hong Kong people.
Okay, she's not like Bridget Lin or something, or Maggie Cheung.
Yeah,
who disappeared.
no. Bridget Lin right now has become a writer. Do you know that? She's very active in those literature circle.
Oh, great.
Yeah, she just got won a reward on the best writer in Hong Kong, Bridget Lin.
Oh, that makes me. What did she write? Like stories?
She wrote no. She wrote some just essay about her life, and then and then I think she's also kind of like a big fan to Eileen Chang. So she also wrote something like review on a book on Eileen Chang. Yeah, so very interesting.
Wow.
Actress.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one, the Narrow Road.
The Narrow Road. So this one is probably the less known of all of the films that we're showing, because it world premiered at the Edinburgh International Film Festival just a few months ago. This one is so good. I can't get over how much I like this one. It's more of an independent film, but at the core is a potential love story, which is why I put it in this section. So it's about two people so it's a COVID movie. It's about ordinary people in Hong Kong who are just trying to get by. So one guy he has a cleaning business, and of course with COVID he's able to pivot in order to doing disinfecting office buildings and stuff. But specifically he's disinfecting the world of the rich. and then meanwhile, his neighbor, who's kind of this spunky single mom, ends up being his assistant. And then, they go on, they're trying to make it. And then there's a little bit of like, do you two like each other? To the narrative, which is, like, it makes this such a lovable, because also like she's got a young daughter and it's like, oh, this would be a good family. But then there's a certain kind of economic reality that starts to set in, and you realize this is more than just a romance. This is about the world that we live in, like the haves and have-nots. This powerful scene in which they go into an apartment building and they notice that this rich people in Hong Kong, they're stockpiling masks. Like boxes and boxes of masks, including kids' masks. And meanwhile, she and her family have to reuse their own masks every single day. And so moments like that, and then of course the little drama of like, should she steal it? And so, that gives it a little bit more dramatic focus, and so it's not just like a socio-realistic portrait. It's just such a endearing movie about what happened in this unusual year. But as you know, like that year was unusual also because of Hong Kong, right? Like that there were protests up to 2019, but by 2020, it's sort of like COVID was possibly what emptied out the streets also.
Yeah.
And so when you see the emptied streets, the film blames it on COVID, but we as an audience know there's more to it than that. There's more backstory than just this is COVID time. So this is what I'm talking about when I say Hong Kong filmmakers are a lot smarter than we give them credit for, right? Like, yeah, there's censorship now, but there's a way to get around it, to tell that story without telling that story. Because there's a sense that the movie throughout, like, you get a feeling of Hong Kong people need to, like, we'll stand up for each other. We'll stick up for each other. Again, that has a different kind of subtext, just knowing what's not being said.
Do you know the previous film for this director? May You Stay Forever Young, 少年. Actually, it was banned. No, I cannot say banned, okay, but it's just because they couldn't get the permit to show it in Hong Kong. But this one, right now, they got the permit, and then they already screened in Hong Kong in the Asian Film Festival in Hong Kong. Yeah. So, because I never seen this film, so I don't know. How about the acting? Because the actress and the actor, actually, both of them got nomination from the Golden Horse, right, from Taiwan. What do you think about the acting?
It's good. They're good.
Okay.
I mean, the guy, I don't remember his name, but like he's in a lot of films now. Like I see him around.
Zhang Gaichong.
Yeah. And then the actress she reminded me a lot of Fei Wang in Chungking Express. Which, not everyone thinks that's necessarily good acting, but it's sort of like it has just energy and personality.
She's new. I think this was her first feature.
Okay. Yeah, I've never seen her before. And so it's just great to see like new blood.
Yeah, new blood. And then also you're right? Hong Kong people are so smart, they can find a way to still present the idea, even though they got something for the previous film. It didn't allow them to show it, but continue to make the production. That's why I think it's very surprised, like the director Lam Sam, he has a new film and he got nomination from the the Golden Horse, and then also like got selected by the San Diego Asian Film Festival. It's a great news to him. Yeah. Okay, and then we still have 3 more to go.
Should we talk about Blue Island next?
Okay, sure. Yeah, it's related, right?
Yeah, it's related. And so this is a case where Hong Kong filmmakers are smart for other reasons.
But no, give me a footnote for that, because this one actually they didn't get the permit to show it in Hong Kong. So
correct.
Right now, the people in Hong Kong, they couldn't watch it. Yeah.
So this is not smart in terms of trying to sidestep the censors, but they had no interest in that. They knew exactly what they were diving into. So this is a, I guess it's not quite right to call it a documentary. It's kind of a hybrid film, documentary and fiction hybrid. So, I mean, the last couple of years, we've seen so many protest movies in Hong Kong, and they're all so valuable, and like we're lucky to have them as a archive, as a time capsule of cameras in the streets. And I'm not saying we're tired of those, because there's still so many stories to be told from the ground perspective. But Blue Island, I think, is aware of the fact that maybe there are other ways to tell that story of protest. And it's aware of the fact that Hong Kongers have been protesting for decades.
Yeah.
That this is not anything. I mean, for so long, I think Hong Kong has a bad reputation for being apolitical. It's like a capitalist bastion, and everyone's so comfortable, and the British, whatever. But actually, I mean, any student of Hong Kong knows that there's long been protests in the 1960s, the riots. We should also, and this film is really smart to mention that after Tiananmen Square, like Hong Kong became actually a very important space for talking about democracy in China. And the film is pretty like explicit about saying like we were on the side of people in China, right? Like we are pro Chinese people who want to find like we feel kinship with people in China who are after their freedom, who are against authoritarianism. So in that way, the film is not anti-China. I think sometimes a lot of these films become branded that way. What they are is they're anti-colonialism, they're anti-imperialism, anti-authoritarianism. They are all about how do we set our people free and how do we have the ability to tell our own stories and live the lives we want. And so sort of like Blue Island takes us away from the kind of obvious identity politics of, you know, Hong Kongers are different from mainlanders. Instead, it's about, that may be the case, but let's talk about what's really at stake, which is our freedom and the freedom of all of us. And so it does that by making these comparisons, right? Like how do we juxtapose these riots of the 1960s with the Tiananmen Square protests in the 80s and 90s and on actually continuing. And then of course with the more recent protests. And that putting it in a continuum. And then also talking about how the current generation is kind of tied up in that legacy. And they do this in such a clever way by having people of this generation reenact the protests
older generation,
of the past.
Right?
Yeah. And so something about it that is kind of uncanny, right? Like, because we know it's all an act. And in the middle of a documentary to have reenactments of the past. But it becomes a sort of a self-aware way of saying, let's, I think a part of it is let's tell this story again, right? Like we don't want somebody else coming in and telling us what our history is, because that's also, in Hong Kong it's happening now, right? The textbooks are being rewritten. And so a movie like this is coming to say, well, let's destabilize that a little bit. This film isn't necessarily trying to say this is what our history is, because it's not. These are all reenactments. There's something kind of explicitly false about it, but it's here as a provocation, as a way of as an echo. It's sort of like this isn't a representation of the past. It's an echo from the past, and echoing into the very bodies of those of us who are protesting today as they are reenacting these scenes. And it's very artful, very creative, and I think very smart.
Yeah, very artful and very creative. And then additional to one more point is from a Hong Kongers view from that is the history of Hong Kong usually, I think even though I was born and raised in Hong Kong, so we know that our history either written by the British or from the Chinese side of the government. And then usually the people in Hong Kong in this historical discourse, we are actually absent in how to speak out our history. And then so I think Blue Island, I think back to the whole thing about the story of Hong Kong, I think Blue Island actually want to very actively to engage in the conversation by telling you, okay, what do our Hong Kong people see about our history? That's why he made that drama thing by asking the younger generation to act the previous generation and to try to have that kind of like conversation and then to tell them, oh, what do I see about, how do you see that part of history? Oh, you are nationalistic, you love your country, but to us, okay, this younger generation, actually, I don't get it, okay? That's why I think they make fun of that when they act that conversation in the past for their older generation. So it kind of like to take the how to say that, like the subject of Hong Kong in the front hand.
Right.
Okay. So our last two, okay, I think our discussion always go back to Johnny To, right? These two.
Oh boy,
we started from Detective, from Johnny To and Wai Ga Fai, and then right now by the end, okay, we also go back to Johnny To.
I know. There was a long-running joke at our festival that it wouldn't be the San Diego Asian Film Festival if there wasn't one, possibly two films directed by Johnny To. Because like 6 years ago, he was making 2 movies a year, and they were all masterpieces.
Yeah.
So the last few years we haven't had any Johnny To movies, but they're new restorations of 2 films I actually did not expect to get the 4K restoration treatment. I mean, I think that when we think about the classics of 1990s Hong Kong cinema, there are certain like bona fide classic movies, right? Like Comrade's almost a love story and all the Wong Kar-wai movies. Usually like the ones that seem a little trashier don't get the very expensive restoration treatment.
Right.
I'm so glad someone took a chance on the Heroic Trio and brought that back. Like for me, like I know Heroic Trio from like VCDs or like back when I was a kid, we would go to like the Chinese video store and be like the double VHS tapes. Like that's how I remember Heroic Trio. I don't even remember if I saw it in Mandarin or Cantonese. Just back in the day, like we just like my parents sort of speak Mandarin, so they've got the Mandarin version probably. Although I don't know if they showed me Heroic Trio because this is a little. I don't know if they should be showing this to kids. There's a lot of baby napping and baby killing in this movie. But I mean, the main attraction is the stars.
Yeah.
And what a year to be celebrating these 3 stars. So front and center is Michelle Yeoh. She's had such an incredible year because of Everything Everywhere All at Once becoming one of the biggest movies in the unexpectedly biggest movies in the world.
Yes.
Which is a movie that's not just starring her, but in some ways it's about her. It's about her star persona, about all the movies she's ever been in. So yeah, Michelle Yeoh, clearly. Anita Mui is in this film, and at our spring showcase earlier this year, we've played the Anita biopic. So she's kind of been back in the spotlight, and I mean, obviously we all love Anita Mui, and any chance to see her on screen is great. And then Maggie Cheung into just Wong Kar-wai with all the new restorations, the new Blu-rays and everything, kind of back in the conversation. So the fact that the 3 of them were in the movie together, where they were just thrashing everyone in sight and just being the coolest people on earth with the best costumes. And Michelle Yeoh, that was the height of her powers. Anita Mui too. Maggie Cheung at this point was still kind of like the cute girlfriend in a lot of movies. It's before she was like in the mood for love, Maggie Cheung. And so it's just great to see them in their element. And I will say, like, having only watched this movie ever on like VCD and VHS, this 4K release is incredible. It's like only Wong Kar-wai movies we thought could look like this from that period. And we can very clearly see just how mad like the story is. Script written by women, that's starring 3 women. And The Executioners is the sequel to it, and that also got the restoration treatment.
Quite surprising, right? Executioner got the restoration, because I think compared to the Heroic Trial, I think is the quality actually go down. But I'm glad that you also picked that one, because I think we won't have any chance to see The Executioner. You know, I think even the box office, it didn't go so well at that moment of time, but the Heroic Trial is really big thing at that year.
I just figured, like, if both are now available on restorations that we can book, I might as well, because like you said, when will I ever have a chance to show Executioners? This is the only time to show it when I have the other one.
I really want to go. I think that was on Wednesday, right?
It's in the middle of the week,
something like that. So I really need to make some plan to go, because the version, just like you mentioned, is on VCD. It's so bad, and then because the movie, the color is very dark, right? I think they shot it in even most kind of like in a cave, something. I don't know, but it's just so dark, and then the VCD quality so bad. I actually couldn't tell what did they do. Right, but I know that they're acting a lot, but it's just the quality. So I'm really expecting for the 4K restoration,
and then to see it with the audience too. Like the audience is gonna just dig up both movies, and they're gonna be laughing.
The first one, the Heroic Trial, they will laugh a lot, because there's so many ridiculous, and then you cannot believe that's made by Johnny To.
Right. Yeah. Before he's like a credible, like great auteur.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And that's kind of like hard to imagine. So that's why I think, is it more like impact by Chen Xiaodong, or
Maybe,
like,
yeah.
Right? You think so?
He did the action on both, and he's actually credited as the co-director on Executioners.
The second one, yeah, but not
Yeah.
the first one, right?
No. Yeah, I think at that time, I mean, a lot of people say Hong Kong action movies are actually directed by the action directors.
Yes.
Like what is the director even doing, really? And maybe Johnny To was actually learning a lot during these times.
Maybe, yeah.
About like how do you craft an action scene?
Yeah.
Because I mean, Ching Sha Tong, like his action scenes are just impeccably put together. What I tell my students is, my students think to shoot an action scene, you just have like 4 cameras on at the same time and then piece it together in the edit. But no, in Hong Kong, they had one camera and they knew exactly what each shot is going to be and how it's related to the other one, and that's why it's so inventive, and that's why it keeps you on the edge of your seat. None of it feels redundant, and yeah.
Okay. So good to have you, Brian, that explained to us all the films, and I feel very exciting. I'm going to see most of them, I think, when I have time, and then I will drive down to San Diego and I will see you, hopefully.
Yep.
Are you going to be there for most of the screening?
I'll be there every day. I don't know if I'm introducing all of these necessarily, but I'm around. So hope to see you and then any of the audiences.
Okay. And then I know the some of the Hong Kong film actually is co-presented by some Hong Kong group, right?
Yep. So I mean, this is also something that I think it's because Hong Kong groups. I mean, San Diego doesn't have a huge Hong Kong community, but it's a tight knit one because I think they realize, like, we need to like get together, and
Exactly,
we need to teach. Like I think a lot of people want to bring their kids out to movies because they can listen to Cantonese and feel like they're part of something bigger. Sometimes and this is why like the Hong Kong diaspora is ever more important right now, as a place where these histories, these stories, these languages will continue to live on.
So thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
I will see you next time, the listener from Hong Kong On Screen Podcast. Bye-bye.